The story of the Amityville Horror begins in the small, quiet town of Amityville, New York, in 1974. Amityville was a picturesque suburb with tree-lined streets and colonial-style homes, a place where neighbors greeted each other warmly and children played freely in the yards. But the peace of this serene community was shattered on the night of November 13th. In the early hours of that day, a horrific crime took place at 112 Ocean Avenue, a large Dutch colonial house that stood out with its distinctive gambrel roof and iconic quarter-moon windows. This house would soon become infamous. Inside, 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. systematically murdered 6 members of his own family as they slept. Using a .35 caliber Marlin rifle, Ronald first shot his parents, Ronald DeFeo Sr. and Louise DeFeo, as they lay in their bed. The noise of the gunshots, surprisingly, did not alert the rest of the family, or if it did, they were too frightened to react. Ronald then moved to his brothers and sisters' rooms, shooting each one in their beds. His sisters Dawn, 18, and Allison, 13, and his brothers Mark, 12, and John Matthew, 9. Each of the victims was found lying on their stomachs, shot at close range. The gruesome scene was discovered later that morning, when Ronald ran into a local bar, shouting that his parents had been shot. Panic ensued as a group of his friends accompanied him back to the house, where they found the lifeless bodies of the DeFeo family. The police were called, and Ronald initially attempted to blame the murders on a mob hitman. However, his story quickly unraveled under intense police questioning, and he eventually confessed to the killings. Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s motive was as baffling as it was terrifying. He claimed that voices in the house had compelled him to commit the horrific act. These voices, he said, tormented him, urging him to kill his family. The claim of hearing voices suggested a possible mental health issue, but it also planted the seeds of a darker, more sinister explanation that would haunt the house for years to come. In December 1975, just over a year after the murders, the house was purchased by George and Kathy Lutz for what seemed like a bargain price of $80,000. The Lutz family, which included George, Kathy, and Kathy's 3 children from a previous marriage, Daniel, Christopher, and Melissa, Missy, moved into the house, hopeful for a new beginning. They were aware of the house's history, but they did not believe it would affect them. Little did they know their dream home was about to become a nightmare that would terrorize them and capture the public's imagination for decades to come. From the moment the Lutz family moved into 112 Ocean Avenue, they began experiencing a series of strange and unsettling phenomena that defied logical explanation. These initial signs of trouble started subtly but quickly escalated, setting the stage for the horrors to come. Despite the house being heated, George and Kathy Lutz noticed cold spots in various rooms. These cold spots were not just slight temperature drops, they were bone-chillingly cold and seemed to move around the house. The living room, where the DeFeo murders had taken place, was particularly prone to these cold spots. George would often find himself shivering, even when standing directly in front of the roaring fire he constantly maintained in the fireplace. The Lutz family dog, Harry, a gentle and normally calm Labrador, began exhibiting unusual behavior almost immediately. He would growl, bark and whine incessantly at seemingly nothing, often focusing his attention on specific corners of the house or at the base of the staircase. At night, Harry would refuse to stay inside, scratching at the door to be let out, only to bark frantically in the yard as if sensing an unseen intruder. Kathy Lutz started to notice strange and unpleasant odours that would appear and disappear without explanation. Sometimes the smell was that of rotten flesh, other times it was a pungent sulphuric stench. These odours would often be concentrated in the kitchen and basement, filling the air and causing discomfort and nausea. One of the more bizarre occurrences was the appearance of a green gelatinous slime that oozed from the walls and keyholes. This substance was unlike anything the family had ever seen and had no discernible source. It would appear randomly and seemed to defy all attempts to clean it up, reappearing in the same spots day after day. Doors and windows would open and close on their own, sometimes with great force. One particularly terrifying incident occurred late at night when George and Kathy were awoken by the sound of their front door slamming shut. Rushing downstairs, they found the door wide open, but no signs of forced entry. This pattern of doors and windows behaving erratically continued, often accompanied by strange knocking sounds that would echo through the house. Both George and Kathy began to have vivid, disturbing nightmares that felt more like memories than dreams. Kathy dreamt of the DeFeo murders in graphic detail. Witnessing the killings through the eyes of Ronald DeFeo Jr. George's dreams were filled with images of demonic faces and a sense of being watched by a malevolent presence. These nightmares were so intense that they often woke up in a cold sweat, feeling as if they had been physically attacked in their sleep. Shortly after moving into 112 Ocean Avenue, the Lutz's youngest daughter, Missy, began talking about a new imaginary friend named Jodie. At first, George and Kathy thought nothing of it, believing Jodie to be a harmless figment of their daughter's imagination, a way for Missy to cope with the stress of moving to a new home. However, Missy's descriptions of Jodie soon became deeply unsettling. Missy described Jodie as a large pig with glowing red eyes. She often spoke about Jodie as if he were real, insisting that he could change his size and shape at will, sometimes appearing as a small pig that could fit on her bed, other times as a giant creature that could fill the entire room. Missy said Jodie would visit her at night, standing by her window and talking to her. Kathy and George were disturbed when Missy started to relay conversations she had with Jodie. She claimed Jodie told her that he was there to protect her and that the house belonged to him. Missy would often draw pictures of Jodie, always depicting him with those eerie, glowing red eyes. These drawings were unsettling, showing Jodie not only as a pig, but also as a menacing presence with sharp, pointed teeth and an almost human-like expression of malevolence. One evening, Kathy walked into Missy's room to find her talking animatedly to what seemed like thin air. When Kathy asked who she was talking to, Missy pointed to the window and said, "Jodie is outside, he wants to come in." Kathy looked outside but saw nothing. However, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread and coldness that seemed to seep into her bones. One night, George and Kathy themselves had a terrifying encounter with Jodie. They were woken up by the sound of Missy laughing and talking in her room. When they entered her room, they found her sitting on her bed, staring at the window with a wide smile. When George looked out the window, he saw two glowing red eyes staring back at him from the darkness. He felt a wave of terror wash over him, and as he blinked, the eyes disappeared. The incident with Jodie's eyes at the window was a turning point for George and Kathy. The glowing red eyes filled them with a primal fear, unlike anything they had ever experienced. George tried to rationalize it as a reflection or some sort of animal, but deep down he knew it was something far more sinister. The house's haunting escalated in the days following the encounter with Jodie. One night, George heard a loud banging noise coming from the garage. When he went to investigate, he found the garage door opening and closing violently by itself. The motor was running, but there was no explanation for its erratic behavior. George tried to stop it, but the door seemed to have a mind of its own, slamming shut with such force that it shook the entire house. Inside the house, objects began to move on their own. Chairs would slide across the floor, pictures fell off the walls, and strange symbols appeared on the mirrors and windows. The air was thick with a malevolent presence that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Kathy tried to cleanse the house with prayers and holy water, but the activity only intensified. The family heard disembodied voices whispering their names, and the oppressive atmosphere made it difficult to breathe. They could no longer deny that they were dealing with something beyond their understanding and control. The final night was the most harrowing. George and Kathy woke to find the house filled with the stench of decay, the walls oozing with a black tar-like substance. The temperature dropped drastically, and they felt a palpable sense of evil closing in on them. Missy was found talking to Jodie, who she said was angry and wanted them to leave. George and Kathy made the decision to flee immediately. They grabbed their children and ran out of the house, leaving behind all their belongings. They drove away in the middle of the night, not looking back, consumed by fear and a desperate need to escape whatever malevolent force had taken hold of their home. After the Lutz family fled, famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren were called to investigate the house. The Warrens were known for their work on high-profile paranormal cases, and their involvement in the Amityville case cemented their reputation. The Warrens entered the house with a television crew and a team of investigators. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, immediately sensed a dark presence. She described it as the most intense and evil she had ever encountered. During their investigation, the team captured a photograph that showed a young boy with glowing eyes peering from a doorway. The boy bore a striking resemblance to one of the DeFeo children who had been murdered. Lorraine Warren had multiple psychic impressions while in the house. She claimed to have seen visions of the DeFeo murders and felt the presence of a demonic entity that had influenced Ronald DeFeo Jr. to commit the murders. Ed Warren attempted to bless the house but reported feeling an overwhelming sense of malevolence. The Warrens concluded that the house was indeed haunted by a demonic presence and that it was unsafe for anyone to live there. The Amityville Horror case has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries and movies. While some skeptics question the validity of the Lutz family's experiences and the Warrens' findings, the story remains one of the most famous and terrifying cases of hauntings in modern history. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue has changed hands several times since the Lutz family fled. Some subsequent owners have reported no paranormal activity, while others have had their own unexplained experiences. The legacy of the Amityville Horror continues to fascinate and terrify those who hear the tale.